All right, welcome back to the Nick Bartlett Show, everybody. And this week, I'll be joined by Scott Wright from the Oklahoman. We're doing a little non-conference type preview in regards to Super West sports and Pac-12 teams here. And so for this week and this edition, we're going to be doing Arizona State versus Oklahoma State. And thank you for coming on the show, Scott.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So the first thing I want to get to before we get to the actual game here is do you feel there'll be a bit of a hangover from last season, or with kind of just all the new moving parts, do you think that it's just kind of going to be forgotten?
Yeah, I think it'll mostly be forgotten because there are really on both sides, so many guys that are going to be playing in this game that weren't part of the game a year ago. Even Oklahoma State, they had 13 guys come in from the portal that are going to be in roles in the two deep. A lot of them starters. So new defensive coordinator, which was obviously one of the interesting storylines for last year, was that it was an Arizona boy, Derek Mason, that was coordinating the OSU defense, and now he's gone as well. So that storyline is gone, and so many players are gone either to the transfer portal or to graduation. That this Oklahoma State team is going to feel very different than the one that Arizona State saw early last season.
Definitely. And speaking of some of those new pieces, pulling up my notes here. So we got Alan Bowman, a Michigan transfer, previously at Texas Tech. Do you feel? I don't want to sugarcoat it. Do you feel he's the guy, or does Garrett Rangel hold a legitimate shot?
Mike Gundy says he's gonna give the guys a couple of weeks in preseason camp to try to figure it out, but Bowman is the guy they really want to take this job and run with it. He's the experienced guy. He's the veteran. They brought him in here to be this guy to kind of be a bridge for 1 year while Rangel and Zane Flores and Gunnar Gundy grow up a little bit, because they're all really young. They got forced into to some work last year. Rangel and Gundy did anyway, when Spencer Sanders was hurt. But they'd like to give them a little bit more time, and then set the stage for a really big quarterback competition in 2024. But the key part of that is number one, Alan Bowman hasn't thrown a ton of passes the last 2 years while he's been the third stringer up at Michigan. Number two, even when he was playing a lot back at Texas Tech, he had some injury issues. He missed multiple games every season of his career over 3 years there. So they've got to keep him healthy. They've got to get him got to get the rust knocked off and let him go be the guy that we've seen that he can be. He's obviously thrown for a lot of yards and had some really bright moments in his career. So it's the ideal situation is that Bowman stays healthy, takes the job and runs with it, and is the leader that they feel like he can be to kind of bring this offense with these returning guys and newcomers from the portal, bring them all together and be a really solid offense that is consistent both running and throwing the ball.
Definitely. I didn't kind of realize they're kind of poised for a nice little quarterback competition here in the future. That should definitely be interesting in years going forward. Moving on here, let's see. So I haven't really heard a lot of hype about Ollie Gordon II. I know there's another back who may actually kind of steal the job. Is there kind of a name to know out of the Cowboys backfield this year?
I mean, Ollie is the guy to know. He was a true freshman last year, didn't get a ton of carries, but was productive. Averaged right around 5 yards a carry when he got the ball. Had a big game at the end of the season when they were dealing with some injuries. Had the best single game rushing performance of the year for an OSU running back last year, 136 yards against West Virginia. So he's the guy. Physically, he's got to show that he can handle the wear and tear of being the main guy in a college backfield. But they do have Elijah Collins coming in from Michigan State, who is a super senior, looking for to make an impact in his final season of college football. And Jaden Nixon is a smaller guy that's a sophomore, small and quick, really good receiver out of the backfield. Can kind of fit into a little bit of a third down type of role, probably for this offense, and give them some versatility back there. So really, all three of those guys are going to get their opportunities, but Ollie is the guy that has the total package and the promise, at least at this point, to become the main guy.
Yeah, I mean, it does always feel like Oklahoma State does kind of have some explosive players. Obviously, I'm covering more West Coast teams, but just from past years, I think of like a Chuba Hubbard kind of cut. I think he's carving up a Pac-12 team, or maybe I turned on a random Big 12 game. Sometimes things happen. But so moving forward here, actually, I guess I'm going to skip on kind of the easier question. I went to Washington State, kind of the outlier of the Pac-12. Maybe we'll still be in the Pac-12. Who knows? But in all seriousness, who do you like out of transfer receiver more? Which transfer receiver do you like more out of Deshaun Stribling from, as I mentioned, WSU, or Arlen Bruce, I believe the fourth? Yes. Maybe not an expert in Roman numerals here, from Iowa.
So they also got Leon Johnson III, who came in. So we got all the Roman numerals covered on the Oklahoma State roster. But out of those guys, Stribling is the most experienced and the most proven, and he's going to be right in the mix for either starting job or really heavily used rotational guy in their primary receiver position. So I expect him to be a really important factor in this. Bruce fits more in the slot, and they do need to add some depth there. They've got Brennan Presley, who was the returning leading receiver from a year ago. So he's going to be the main guy in the slot, but Bruce can do some different things with his versatility and things like that. So those two guys are both going to play important roles, but Stribling has a chance to be a really major factor in the way that they use their primary receiver. He could have a really big year at Oklahoma State.
I haven't seen enough of Brennan Presley. Any chance that Stribling takes over kind of the number one role, or is Presley just a little too good?
It's one of those type of things where Presley is more your short routes, possession type receiver, go get a first down on 3rd and 6 type of guy. Whereas Stribling's going to be more of a downfield option, I think. Some deeper crossing routes, some flies, some things like that. So it could be one of those things where maybe a guy like Stribling comes along and is maybe he leads them in yardage, whereas Presley maybe leads them in receptions. So it could be that type of situation. So it's they like to spread the ball around, like to throw the ball a ton, and they'll have those two guys on the field a lot in terms of those two receiver positions. So it's one of those things. Just kind of depends on what defenses do, whether they give them the inside of the field or the outside.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, just going back, as a WSU fan, I know that we've had a long list of talented receivers going back to that changed a little bit when Mike Leach kind of came over and built a little bit of a solid passing attack. So I'm wishing Stribling success with the Cowboys. Once Coug, love, but I wish him a lot of success with the Cowboys.
Yeah, and the Cowboys had some good luck with another former Cougar, and Tay Martin, a couple of years ago. They really liked what he did there when he came to Oklahoma State too. So they like that connection.
Yeah, no doubt. Moving ahead though here, I think maybe I'm just a little sad about Stribling here. Little thoughts, but I'm moving ahead here. In all seriousness, are there any players I should know on the offensive line outside of a transfer Dalton Cooper?
Yeah, I mean, Cooper is probably the guy that's in the spotlight the most going in, because they are making a change there at left tackle. Cole Birmingham is a guy who was injured all of last year, actually got hurt the spring before and missed all of last season. He was a guy the year before that was coming on really strong back in 2021 and looked like a pretty promising player, then missed last season. So they need to get something productive from him. They're trying to really emphasize the run game more in terms of their blocking schemes, doing some things a little bit differently than they've done the last few years to try to get things going again. But overall, that's a couple of really important guys. Jason Brooks Jr. was a transfer from Vanderbilt last year who wasn't a starter at the beginning of the year and then overtook a job and played really well down the stretch. And then they've got guys like Preston Wilson, who was at center last year, moving over to right guard. another veteran. He started at 4 different positions on the line and can do a lot of things. So they've got some experience. They've just got to put it together and take things to the next level compared to where they were a year ago.
No doubt, no doubt. Feels like the line, to me, I mean, this from a very obviously outside perspective, maybe kind of the focal point of offense. I think we've actually been going here for a little bit on the O. So just, do you have I guess either a key player or a focal point of the offense this year?
There's just so many. I think the offensive line is the most important place to start, because even if Alan Bowman doesn't win the job at quarterback, whoever's back there has got to be protected. They've got to be able to run the ball better than they did a year ago. So it starts with this offensive line. Like I said, they're changing up some of their blocking schemes, getting a little bit more old school in what they do up front, rather than a lot of zone blocking that they've done the last few years. So that's the most important thing. But they've got every position group that we've talked about. You've got transfers, you've got returning players. You got to meld all of this together and make it work. But it's got to start with that offensive line.
For sure. And I mean, just looking at for those of you out there, obviously we got to cover Arizona State a little bit here. I did a preview on them a couple weeks ago, and there's just not a lot. That's why we're spending most of our time on Oklahoma State today. But in regards to the actual game, I mean, you're looking at Arizona State's defense. You got defensive ends Clayton Smith and Prince Dorba. I believe they've made some noise in training camp. They have a return named BJ Green, who's kind of like hybrid end tackle, led the team in sacks over the past 2 years at 7.5. And the biggest name I've been hearing from some local Arizona State writers is Ro Torrance, and I think he's like either it's like a third team selection or something like that in Athlon. But outside of that, I'm trying to tread lightly. There's not a lot else we can say for Arizona State. A lot of transfers, so I'm thinking that probably the Cowboys have a little bit of advantage in terms of that aspect of the field. But hopping over to the defensive side of the ball here, how do you feel about new defensive coordinator Brian Nardo getting in from Gannon University? Not necessarily anything too out of the realm for I personally feel like outsiders saying pokes. I feel like I have to earn that. So you only hear me say Cowboys or Oklahoma State, but for Oklahoma State, this isn't too out of the realm. I personally feel it's probably pretty cool. So what's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I've been very impressed with him. Only got to talk to him one time throughout spring ball. Mike Gundy likes to keep his coordinators limited in how much media time they have so that they can focus on football. But I've talked to a lot of people who have worked with Brian Nardo. I've talked to his family. This is a really talented, smart, up and coming young coach. He's 37 now, I believe, maybe 38 now. But he really has a strong understanding of the 3-3-5 that some teams like Iowa State and others around the country have started using over the last few years. And Mike Gundy hates going against that defense, so he decided that he wants to bring that in and run it. And so it's unique in the way it operates, and really key in the way they disguise things. So pre-snap they look very similar from play to play, and you don't know whether it's going to be a more heavily run defense or dropping a bunch of guys. So they're excited about the defenses that they're bringing. It's leading to some changes. Colin Oliver was Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year 2 years ago as a defensive end. Now he's moving to an outside linebacker role, which really seems to fit his skill set well. But it's a different position. It's a learning process for him. Kendall Daniels is a guy stepping in at safety who looks like a big time playmaker and seems to fit that middle safety of the 3-3-5 really well. So a lot of intriguing changes or slight differences in this defense compared to what Oklahoma State had been running under Jim Knowles and then Derek Mason the last year. So, but Nardo seems like a guy. He's been a coordinator, but only at the Division II level. He understands in-game calls and those sorts of things, but he's never done it against a Big 12 team. His highest level of coaching was coaching linebackers at Youngstown State. for a couple of years before he went out to Gannon and started running his defense again. But a really young guy, really talented young guy with a lot of veteran experience around him. The rest of the Oklahoma State defensive staff, they're all upwards of 8 years on staff, some as long as 12 or 13 with like linebacker coach Joe Baum Clemens. So you've got a lot of experience around him, and he brings in the knowledge of the defense and some play calling experience. And they're hoping that they can blend all of that together and have a really successful defensive season.
Yeah, and that's an interesting element too. That's something I wouldn't have known is the fact of obviously maybe a little bit more experience would be desired, but having all those veteran guys around him, like you said, that could prove a really interesting combination and maybe a nice blend of sorts. So that should be interesting. I like the 3-3-5 to me. I'm always a little bit kind of like sketchy in terms of like non-base defense and maybe a little bit more traditional in terms of the NFL. And I'll call it just straight away from that. But I like Gundy's reasoning in terms of he didn't like going against it. That's I can feel that from my days in Madden. I like that a little bit. So yeah, you touched on Colin Oliver a little bit there. I guess how good is the secondary? Obviously headlined by Kendall Daniels. For those of you out west who don't know him, all Big 12 defensive freshman of the year and freshman All-American.
Yeah, big time player. He's got an NFL body, 6'4". I think he's weighing about 205 right now, and a long wingspan. He's got the speed to go match up with slot receivers. He's physical enough to cover tight ends, and he loves coming down into the box in run coverage. And that middle safety, one play you're going to be acting as a middle linebacker. The next play you're going to be a free safety playing center field. You got to be able to do it all, and he's shown that he has the ability in all of those areas. Still a young guy. He was only a redshirt freshman last year. Wasn't even a starter at the beginning of the year. They kind of tried to work him into it slowly, and he really took it and ran with it. You mentioned freshman All-American, Big 12 Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. He's a guy that will make plays up in the box, and he can make plays in the secondary in coverage as well. He had forced fumbles, he had interceptions, had a ton of tackles behind the line. So he is a really integral part to them being able to run this defense well. Because that is a piece that really holds so much together on the back end of the 3-3-5 defense. Going to be really important. Got some other experience around him. A guy like Trey Rucker, who's started his career at Wake Forest, came on and had a really good bowl game last year. Lyric Rawls, another young guy that's been coming up and that they're really excited about. Then they've got some experience with a guy like Corey Black on the corner. So. Still trying to figure out who the other corner is going to be. That'll be an interesting one to watch throughout fall camp. But really a good group of experienced players on the back end of this defense.
Definitely, and that's probably bodes well for Oklahoma State, considering that would be the one thing if I had to highlight here about ASU. That is what ASU has to offer. I know there's no one knows whether it's going to be Drew Pine or Trenton Bourguet in terms of who's starting for the Sun Devils, but they do have Elijah Badger and Jalen Conyers. I believe Badger's the wideout and Conyers the tight end. And they also got a transfer receiver that from Idaho State. I think his name is Xavier Gilroy. So that should be really fun to kind of watch the Arizona State's receivers versus Oklahoma State secondary. That's a lot of states in one. But yeah, so I think that could be maybe that could probably be maybe the key matchup of the game here. Hopping back to the Cowboys here. Any other names that I should know on defense? I've heard good things about the Tulsa transfers. You want to start there? We can get back to them, but maybe some less notable names. I'm thinking like a Nathan Latu or Justin Kirkland. I think you actually just touched on the secondary players. I was going to say so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned Kirkland there. He's a guy that I'm really intrigued by. A guy that was pretty lightly recruited out of high school, ended up at Utah Tech, had a great freshman year. I had a chance to stand next to the guy during OSU's pro day. He was just hanging around last March, and he's listed at 6'4", 346, and he's every bit of it. He is a massive human being, and obviously, when you go from a 4-man line to a 3-man line, you need a big guy in the middle to eat up some blockers, and he looks like the type of guy that can do that. Whether he ends up with great stats at the end of the year is hard to say. Could be one of those guys that just takes up a center and a guard every play and lets linebackers make plays behind him. But he looks like the type of guy that you need in the middle of a 3-man defensive line. So I'm really intrigued by him. One of the Tulsa transfers, Anthony Goodlow, a guy that it was actually kind of funny. Before I moved to the Oklahoma State beat, I was covering high schools. He was a kid from the Oklahoma City metro area, just outside of the city in Del City. When I was covering him as a sophomore, he was a 200-pound safety, and now he's a 290-pound defensive end. So it's been fun to watch his growth as a football player over the last few years. But transfers from Tulsa, and he's another guy that really fits the 3-man line really well, because he is 285, 290, and has some edge speed, but can get in the middle and mix it up as well. So both of them very intriguing. Nathan Latu is a guy. He had his brother was the tight end at Alabama the last couple of years. People might be familiar with the last name, but he's a guy that went to junior college and has really been seeing a bigger and bigger role each of the last 2 years. So he's a guy that I think fits this defense very well. Also, and then at the linebacker position, Justin Wright, another Tulsa transfer, middle linebacker type guy that I think is a spot that they really needed. They had Mason Cobb last year. He transfers to USC, and they needed to fill that hole with a veteran presence, and Wright really fits the mold there. You get him in the middle, and then Colin Oliver at one of the outside linebacker spots. Then you got most likely Xavier Benson at the other outside linebacker spot. He was a guy that a JUCO guy who started every game last season at the outside linebacker spot. So got some experience there. They really like the versatility of that group, their lateral quickness, and the things that they can do. So they've got a lot of pieces that they really like on this defense overall. It's just a matter of, one, learning the defense, because it's very different than what a lot of guys have ever run before, and two, just meshing together and being on the same page in the first year of running this defense.
Yeah, definitely. I don't even know where you'd kind of start with the 3-3-5. That does feel a little bit different for sure. Let's see here. I think pretty much covered all the players. Pretty much covered all the players I want to talk about here on defense. I always want to add, I shouldn't say I always want to add, I forgot to ask a different writer last week. Is there anything you would like to add on the special teams? I know they got, I think it's Alex Hale's returning, was a Groves Award semifinals before a knee injury. And I guess, how dangerous is Presley's return? Either of those notable?
Both. Presley is a very dangerous return man. Had a big one for a touchdown against Oklahoma 2 years ago that really sparked that comeback and a big win. And then Jaden Nixon, the running back I mentioned, also had a kick return for a touchdown against Baylor last year. So they've got weapons in that game. The special teams is something they really take a lot of pride in, particularly coverage, but also on returns. So really important factor there. Alex Hale, you mentioned, he was a Groves Award finalist. He was 13 of 14, a little past midway of the 2020 season, and tore his ACL in a pregame warmup. Just a really fluke injury that was very odd to watch, and kind of struggled with his confidence coming back from that, but seems to be back and swinging much better now. Had a really good spring, so that's important. They've got a new punter. Mike Gundy he was very happy with what he got from Australia in Tom Hutton over the last 4 years. So he went back to Australia and found another one, Hudson Cack, who is a freshman, 21-year-old freshman coming in. One of those guys that was an Aussie rules football player his whole life, and finally gave punting a shot at Pro Kick Academy there in Australia that has produced so many talented punters over the last several years now. So they became very focused, particularly with Hutton, on high hang time. Get your coverage guys down there. They've never really worried too much about distance with their punting. It's all about limiting returns, and that's something that seems to fit Hudson's style really well.
Definitely, yeah. I didn't when I had all the questions about the punter, so I should say I'm lucky that a writer called me out last week, so it gave me always a quick reminder to ask about the special teams here. So you got is it too early with all the transfers? I think Arizona State's got a couple more. Looks like Oklahoma State might be a little bit more settled, but too early for a game prediction for you?
Oh, I mean, I'll as long as we clarify that this is before preseason, I don't mind throwing out. I mean, I feel like Oklahoma State's got a little bit of an edge because I do think that the areas where they're needing help, they were able to address in the portal. You never know what direction things can go once you get into August and all of that, but and you got to keep guys healthy, and who knows where we're at on September 9th, I think is the date of the game, maybe the 8th, but things can change between now and then, but I think Oklahoma State is pretty excited with the direction things are going, the pieces that they're putting together, and for both sides, it's just going to be a matter of finding some team chemistry and being able to execute and play as a team on Saturdays in September. So we'll see what direction it goes, but right here, before they've strapped on the pads yet, I would give Oklahoma State a slight edge in this one.
Cool. I think we're on the same page. I think you might be, well, I can out phrases. You're being a little bit kinder than I am. Basically, I think the Oklahoma State's probably just, there's too many questions mark for me on Arizona State. I'm thinking like a 35-21 victory for Cowboys. That's just me kind of preseason. I think this is one of those few ones I might stand on. I'm going to stand on it. I think that I just don't think that Arizona State has quite enough this year, and I think that it may not bode me well with too many Pac-12 fans. I think I live far out west here, but I do think that historically the Big 12 just has a little bit more explosive players at the receiver and running back positions, and the line might just be a tiny bit bigger. But I could be wrong about the line on that last part, but that's just my feel of the game. And then since for whatever reason they decided to give me a show, I always come with kind of one normal question and then one question that just suits only me. So my first question would be just kind of what's like your favorite sport outside of football, or is it just football 100%?
In terms of my favorite to cover, college softball has been just a blast to cover here in Oklahoma. Obviously, with the World Series here in Oklahoma City, it's always a big event. So even before Oklahoma got going and took off really crazy here the last several years, it was always a really cool sport to be around. Now Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are playing well, so that's it's a real joy around here. But beyond that, you'll find me on the golf course a lot, and I love covering golf as well.
Definitely, no. That's not where I was thinking. I know that I gotta admit it. That Husky team in Seattle has done pretty good in the softball tournament. I don't think, fortunately, my squad has one. But no, it's interesting you say that because I actually started out as a girls basketball coach, like really young, kind of low level stuff. So that answer caught me a little bit off guard for sure. And then my last question. This is the one that only I have to ask because it's true to me, and it's probably what I did last night. I don't want to maybe admit it because it's too nerdy. But did you watch professional wrestling as a kid? And if you did, do you have a favorite wrestler in past, present, or current?
Ooh, favorite wrestler. I did watch, and I was so I was born in 1978, so I was getting into it, mid 80s. When obviously it was really hitting its first big peak with Hulk Hogan and Randy Macho Man Savage and Junkyard Dog and Andre the Giant and some of those type of guys. And so if I was going to go to my favorite, I'm probably going back to that era. I was always obsessed with the Junkyard Dog. I can't really wrap my head around exactly why. But he was a dude that always got me excited. So kind of an off the wall answer. Probably not a lot of folks even from my generation that are going that direction. But I was always a big fan of him.
I thoroughly like that answer. I appreciate that answer. I want to say, just because of my youth, I want to say I'm 97.2% sure that I know exactly who that is. I've watched like a couple of like WrestleMania 1, 2, and 3. I believe he was in one of those. Yeah, appreciate that answer. So definitely kind of just coming back to the game here, or the Oklahoma State football, because it is kind of football podcast here. Do appreciate everyone go look up Junkyard Dog, because I know I'm probably gonna do that a little bit. But in all seriousness, looking at Oklahoma State this year, looks like kind of still wondering a little bit about the quarterback position. You just did the whole preview. I'm not gonna do it. You did it better than I did. Is there anything else you want to add about Oklahoma State, college football, or this game in general?
The only thing I think is interesting about this matchup on the bigger landscape is how soon, if at all, is this going to be a conference game? I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with the Big 12 trying to expand to the West, and what might happen with the Pac-12. Do OSU and Arizona State, match up someday as conference rivals? That would be a very interesting thing to see, or some of the others up there, Colorado or Utah or Arizona.
All right, that is that's gonna probably wake up some Pac-12 fans. But I actually think I'm a do a couple different things here, so I respect the business acumen of that. So again, thank you for coming on, Scott, of the Oklahoman. Did I say it right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, seriously, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.